Today's story is a revenge story, centering on a husband reclaiming his life after his wife cheated and disregarded their decade-long union. Now he is living his best life while his wife's existence spirals into chaos. Let's get into today's story to discover the series of events. I refer to her as my wife to maintain the context of our relationship at that time. We had been in a decade-long partnership and were about 10 days from celebrating 2 years of marriage, all without any children. She held the lease to our home, and our intimate life had become stagnant for 9 months, following a 3-month period of dwindling sexual activity. When the moment arrived, it manifested as the stereotypical, obligatory, intimate encounter. Throughout those 9 months, she also withheld any form of affection, whether it be hugs, caresses, touches, or kisses. Any form of tenderness was met with rejection. Her rationale for this stark withdrawal was that it served as her method of motivating me to focus on completing my PhD thesis. I must confess, I did require some form of incentive to make progress on my thesis. Following the completion of my research, I had transitioned into a different career, and my motivation to complete the thesis had waned. I unwittingly succumbed to this abusive manipulation, masquerading as a well-intentioned push. Despite my reservations, I attempted to persevere. Every available moment I could carve out was dedicated to sitting in front of my computer, endeavoring to finish the thesis. Meanwhile, she chose to spend her time engrossed in television, endlessly scrolling through social media, or conversing with her friends via text and calls. Our time as a couple had become virtually non-existent. After enduring this for approximately 3 months, I crumbled under the strain of my thesis and the absence of affection, coupled with constant rejection. I was begging for affection and was always being rejected. This was a devastating blow to my spirit. Whenever I found myself alone and not engaged in my daily work, my mind would invariably drift towards contemplating. As I contemplated, a profound moment of clarity washed over me. I suddenly recognized the root of my inner turmoil and found the resolve to address it by eliminating what I believed to be the source of my distress. Just in that instant, I made the conscious choice to halt my thesis writing efforts, and a few weeks later, I ceased my pursuit of affection through incessant pleas. The outcome was surprisingly effective. However, our relationship had transformed from husband and wife to mere roommates. She remained engrossed in her phone, incessantly texting or making calls, even during the rare occasions when we engaged in activities together. A colleague who seemed to prioritize everything else over our relationship with me. She started to make a real effort to repair our relationship, but it was too late. She started to make a routine of taking phone calls and bathroom breaks during hours when, for the past 10 years, she would have typically been asleep. She began making plans to socialize with her female friends and co-workers on weekends, engaging in catch-up sessions and gossip that held little appeal for me. Consequently, she opted to go on these outings alone, organizing dinners that led to long conversations in the parking lot. This explained her early morning arrivals. She engaged in these activities with her unfamiliar coworkers, and I wasn't included. either because she believed I wouldn't blend in or because I was visiting my hometown to see my parents. Whenever I voiced my concerns about those odd behaviors, she consistently brushed them aside and made me question my own sanity. Whenever she required my assistance, she could exhibit kindness, but as soon as her needs subsided, she would revert to mistreating me. The only 2 weeks within those 9 months when she displayed sweetness and created the illusion of a return to our previous affectionate relationship, albeit without any romantic involvement, was when she requested my help to work on a chapter of her PhD thesis. It had to do with programming, a field she had no knowledge of. Sure as anyone with a reasonable perspective could observe, I was consistently taken advantage of and mistreated. However, I was oblivious to it back then. Even if you were to highlight all the issues in our relationship, I wouldn't acknowledge them. If you were to hint at the possibility of her cheating, I would be really mad at you. A year ago today, I began to awaken to the truth. We were on vacation, basking in the beauty of a Mediterranean island, and I firmly believed we were commemorating our 10th anniversary. Admittedly, our relationship was in a troubled state. To be honest, it had already withered away, but I remained oblivious to it at the time. However, she consistently emphasized the importance of commemorating all significant dates and cherished the tradition of exchanging gifts. It's worth mentioning that I'm not particularly enthusiastic about gift exchanges and had previously let her down in that aspect. As in our 10th anniversary, I had chosen a special gift for her, believing it would hold significance, despite our recent relationship challenges. As on that day, I proposed going out to a restaurant for dinner instead of our usual in-apartment meals. She began to criticize my idea, deeming it foolish and questioning why we should spend money when we could dine perfectly well at our apartment. I explained that the day held a special significance, but I chose not to reveal that it was our 10th anniversary. She seemed to have forgotten the significance of that day. As the day drew to a close, I discreetly placed her gift beneath her pillow, hoping that its discovery would jog her memory about the day's importance. When she stumbled upon it, she remained puzzled about the unexpected gesture, as it wasn't my usual practice to surprise her. But to surprise her with gifts? That's when it hit me. She had completely forgotten about it. Isa takes in the grand scheme of things, it might appear insignificant, but her forgetfulness stung me deeply, intensifying the emotional turmoil I was already experiencing. Strangely, if you had asked me then, I wouldn't have acknowledged how shattered I truly felt. Sure, we had our share of minor issues, just like any other couple, but in hindsight, I can't help but cringe at my own naivety. But on that particular day, I made a crucial choice. I initiated individual counseling to address what I had once believed to be our primary issue, the intimacy desert in our relationship. In hindsight, it's clear that this was just a fraction of our problems. Nevertheless, the significant step I took was to kickstart my personal counseling immediately after we returned from our vacation. During my individual counseling sessions, I began to gradually recognize the various forms of abuse I had endured. Yet despite the pain, I held onto a strong desire to mend our relationship and return to the happiness we once shared. I yearned for the way things used to be, but though the thought of her being unfaithful briefly flitted through my mind, I swiftly dismissed it. Such a notion seemed implausible. I firmly believed we were merely traversing a difficult phase. Numerous innocent explanations crossed my mind as I analyzed her actions. However, after approximately 3 months of weekly individual counseling, coupled with a growing number of instances of blatant disrespect, I couldn't help but wonder if her behavior might be attributed to an affair. Could it be that she had grown so comfortable that she no longer felt the need to conceal her actions, making infidelity a plausible explanation for her abusive behavior? Would you like some specific examples to illustrate my point? She consistently held onto her phone, ensuring it was either in her hand or within her line of sight, always face down. She carried it with her everywhere, including the bathroom, which was a departure from her previous habits. This change was evident during our shared activities, particularly considering our previous lack of intimacy. And instead of engaging in any romantic moments, she would frequently interrupt for work-related matters, notably assisting a coworker during more demanding and hectic periods. Today he requires my assistance, and tomorrow I might need his help. At least that's what she said. Thus, on my birthday, we celebrated at a nightclub. We were joined by some of my longtime friends, who quickly became her friends too. As throughout the night she was glued to her phone, going so far as to pick up a call at around 3 in the morning, attributing it to her friend Grace's fake name. But it became apparent early in the conversation that something was off. I came to realize that her claim of talking to Grace was a lie. Who in the world calls someone at 3 in the morning, especially when they're married? Why would she even pick up that call, let alone fabricate the caller's identity? And why, on the night of my birthday, while we were cherishing rare moments with our friends due to life's busy course, would she spend nearly an hour conversing with this mysterious individual in the wee hours of the morning? I believe you've all likely guessed the identity of the mysterious caller. And you're correct, though I remained oblivious to it at the time and had no inkling of suspicion. I simply regarded it as another act of disrespect. On a separate occasion, we discussed going to the cinema that Friday night to catch a movie we both wanted to see, as it was the last chance to do so that day. She expressed fatigue and a lack of interest in going out. She expressed her desire to stay in and relax on the sofa, and I completely understood and was okay with it, so I stayed at home as well. We had dinner together, and then she received a call from her male coworker, the same one from the previous calls, and she agreed to meet up for coffee and discuss some upcoming changes in the department. It hadn't even been an hour since she had claimed to be too tired to go out. I informed her that I wouldn't remain at home after she had discarded our plans, and instead I would head to the cinema to watch a movie on my own. But trust me, I could have just as easily stayed home and not enjoyed myself. That's how I managed to salvage some of the fun I had originally intended to have. Who am I? Well, I'm just me from the past after all. She promptly switched outfits, donning a lovely summer dress that was easy to put on, if you catch my drift. Then she went with him. Yes, he picked her up near our building, though I didn't get a glimpse of him. I admit I felt foolish. I was seething with anger due to the blatant disrespect. But at that moment, cheating was the least likely reason on my mind. When I returned home from the movie, she was nowhere to be found. I made a call, but there was no response. I called once more, but there was still no response. Frustrated, I decided to send her a text message. Her reply read, "I'll be back home in half an hour." I made up my mind to wait by the window, hoping to catch a glimpse of the car and the man she returned with. However, she didn't return until about 2.5 hours later. I did get to see the car, and I even overheard snippets of their conversation while they were outside the car. What I heard immediately evoked memories of the way we used to bid each other farewell during the early days of our relationship. At that juncture, the possibility of cheating began to rise up the list of potential reasons for her behavior, but it still wasn't at the top of the list. Yes, I was still naive and dumb. Nobody could be having that much fun at work or with friends. That's when the realization hit me that she was indeed cheating on me. It felt as though my heart had been ripped from my chest. I had stumbled upon the proverbial smoking gun. Yet in my mind, it still didn't quite register as definitive evidence. So, with a heavy heart, I resolved to discreetly check her phone. That it was a difficult decision, as I considered it a terrible breach of trust. I believe that once you reach that point, the relationship is already on the brink of collapse. I felt that trust would be irrevocably shattered, and there would be nothing salvageable in our relationship. I did manage to create an opportunity to look at her phone, but I backed down at the last moment, unable to go through with it. I confided in a friend who shared with me that he had experienced being cheated on too, although he had never mentioned it before. He recognized similarities between the behavior of my wife and his own unfaithful girlfriend. But that sealed the deal for me. I eventually seized the chance to sneak a look at her phone, and there it was in all its shocking detail. Thousands of text messages exchanged between her and this coworker who was going through a challenging period due to his mother's Alzheimer's diagnosis. It felt like another devastating blow. The content was shockingly explicit, filled with conversations, and even included pictures of them both in their underwear. They had been engaged in this affair for a whole year, a revelation that hit me like a ton of bricks. Oh, it dawned on me that this was the exact duration of our dead bedroom, a time during which she had tormented me by denying any affection or intimacy. Not only did she opt to cheat on me, but she also seemed to be dedicated and faithful to the other man, as if being with her own husband was somehow the act of betrayal. Surprisingly, I found a strange relief in her decision. It spared me from the tormenting thoughts of having been intimate with her, both before and after her encounters with him. The moment I discovered this incontrovertible evidence, I was devastated, though by that point I had already braced myself for the worst and didn't fall apart immediately. I made the firm decision to end our relationship as swiftly as possible. Thankfully, my circumstances were about as favorable as they could be given the situation. I contemplated the idea of promptly relocating once I secured a suitable place of my own. If I made a firm decision not to divulge what I had discovered, particularly the means through which I had acquired this information. As a result, I maintained my calm demeanor and feigned ignorance, even extending a hand to assist her in dressing for the grand corporate soiree she was getting ready for, fully aware that it wasn't the primary attraction of the evening. Knowing that he would also be present, it was only natural to assume that they would engage in their typical flirtatious behavior. Engage in typical adult activities. But about an hour later, she departed and I finally could grieve, cry, yell, get mad, and let all my emotions out. Actually, I found it impossible to sleep and remained awake until her return at approximately 6 in the morning. When she finally came home, she casually mentioned that her group of friends had been the last to leave the party and that it had been a fantastic time. However, you and I both understand what had truly been remarkable about the night. In one of her subsequent texts to him later that day, she cryptically remarked, "The after-party left my thigh bruised because of the handbrake." In my country, nearly every car is equipped with handbrakes positioned between the driver's and passenger seats, so it's clear what kind of after-party had taken place over the weekend. Throughout the week, I continued to feign ignorance while consulting with lawyers, securing a new place to live, and organizing the forwarding of my mail to a different address. Meanwhile, she consistently worked late hours at her job. A further inspection of her messages unveiled that she wasn't at work, but rather eagerly awaiting the other guy for another rendezvous of intimacy. In the preceding 2 weeks, they had been more active in their liaisons than my wife and I had been throughout the previous 17 months of our marriage. Quite the accomplishment, my dear wife. By Friday, I had all my preparations in order for the impending move. Once she had left for work, my family arrived and provided assistance in packing up all my belongings, which were subsequently transported to my new residence. As the day came to a close, I sent her a message that read, "You're well aware of your actions. I vacated the house and am initiating divorce proceedings." Immediately after delivering the message, I blocked her and contacted her mother to apprise her of the impending divorce. I refrained from providing an explanation and simply conveyed that her daughter knew what she had been doing and should be the one to clarify. My wife persistently attempted to call me without success, resorting to dialing my mother, a rare occurrence as she had never reached out to her in the past 10 years. She also made attempts to contact my friends, but they had been briefed on the situation and never answered her either. Subsequently, she resorted to sending text messages via the same app she used to communicate with her affair partner. In a bizarre turn of events, she accused me of being manipulated. This in light of her absurd accusations, which seemed like a classic case of projection, I decided to block her. Our communication was limited to just 2 more conversations after that. To the following Wednesday, I phoned her to inform her that the lawyer had dispatched a letter containing all the divorce-related details. she attempted to adopt the persona of the lost wife, who was bewildered by the situation and couldn't comprehend why I was taking this step. Tears streamed down her face as she professed that she had always fought for our relationship, contrasting it with my supposed lack of effort. She went on to express that she had been contemplating marriage counseling for some time. It's quite remarkable that I came close to being deceived. My vulnerable and wounded heart began to waver, tempting me to embrace her deceitful claims. Fortunately, I had preserved copies of their messages, and reviewing some of them helped me regain my sense of reality. Indeed, it was a painful process, but it was necessary to maintain my resolve and not give in. They familiarized themselves with every convenient parking spot for intimate encounters near our residences, his residence, and their workplace. It's highly probable that they engaged in such activities at their workplace, specifically in their office building. However, the most agonizing revelation was that they routinely engaged in these actions in our own home, in our bed, living room, kitchen, practically everywhere. The final conversation I had with her occurred approximately a month later when we signed the divorce. During that interaction, she attempted to project a cold, distant, and superior demeanor. But toward the end, I confronted her with my knowledge of her actions involving the affair partner. Her response went something like this: "Everything I did was merely an attempt to provoke a reaction from you." I believe she may not have comprehended the extent of my knowledge. She might have even assumed that my frustration stemmed solely from the attention she was giving to the other guy. The following weekend, I had a meeting with her parents and shared most of the challenges I had experienced due to her actions, including the affair, although I refrained from disclosing the specific messages. By doing that, I was essentially conveying the message that I had uncovered her actions, and that this was the way I had gained knowledge about her secret life. However, I refrained from presenting the actual evidence. That marks the final instance in which I interacted with any member of her family. As for coping with the trauma, I sought solace in individual counseling. I have continued with this therapy to this day, using it as a means to navigate and heal from the emotional turmoil I experienced. I leaned on the support of my friends and family, never concealing her cheating. Concealing it would have been a form of complicity. Whenever I felt the need to cry, I allowed my emotions to flow freely. The tears came in waves, with moments of relative calm followed by sudden waves of overwhelming emotion. I embraced the process, knowing that by letting it all out, I could begin to heal, and with time, things would improve. I haven't experienced such an episode in months, yet I acknowledge that they could resurface at any moment, and that's perfectly fine. I began indulging in activities that piqued my interest, primarily attending concerts and exploring new hobbies. Attending concerts and watching plays at theaters. Attend events even when you're not in the mood to do so. It's a chance to connect with new individuals and step outside of your comfort zone. While it won't miraculously solve your issues, the uplift you receive from engaging with new people, even if it's only for a brief conversation, can be truly uplifting. Consciously work on increasing your interactions with others. As an introvert, I understand that this can be challenging, but also crucial. The only way to improve your ability to engage in conversations and be comfortable around others is by actively practicing it. It's been a challenge, but over time it does become more manageable. Thank you for listening to the story to the end, and if you like it, please support us with a like as well as subscribe to our channel. But write in the comments what you think about the story.